that could be just a subjective experience. No, there is corroboration to these dreams. So I'll give you an example.
Shawn Ryan sat down with Lee Strobel to discuss the resurrection, scientific evidence for God, and a lot of other different things. You're in for a treat.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is getting framed and put in the studio. Thank
Awesome.
you, thank you, thank you. What, we're going to dive into this more towards the end of the interview
Sure.
a little bit, but I'm just curious, there's a lot of talk about spiritual warfare right now.
Yeah.
And so I'm always curious, what gets people into, what prompted you to write this book?
It's a great question. We live in a scientific age. We live in a technological age, and there's a lot of people who say that science disproves Christianity, disproves faith, which I disagree with. And they say there's nothing more to reality than what we can see and touch. And I said, that's not true. There is more to reality than what we can see and touch.
This is one of those objections that just won't go away. It just keeps coming back again and again and again. It's like one of those zombies, right? You see in the movies or in the games. No matter how many times it's been disproven, people just want to hold on to it. I guess it maybe gives them comfort. There is no conflict between science and Christianity. In a lot of ways, they are answering two different questions. People will conveniently overlook that a majority of early scientists were Christians, and they viewed science as a way to honor God. Let's also not forget, as Jordan Peterson pointed out in his conversation with Richard Dawkins, that science as we know it arose in a Christian society. It didn't come about in one of those other civilizations. It seems as if it was only possible for science to arise in a Christian society.
Any other way other than God is entering into our world and creating a miracle. Deathbed visions. People see just before they die often a glimpse of what's to come. Stephen in the Bible, just before he died, he saw a glimpse of heaven. And this is extremely common. So I have a chapter on that. Near-death experiences, people who are clinically dead and yet have an experience that's corroborated in one way or the other. Direct encounters from God, how God reaches down and touches lives, mystical dreams. I believe, and the Bible teaches this, that there is a realm beyond what we can currently see and touch. And it is every bit as real as the realm that we're in and experience day by day. Spiritual warfare comes in because part of that other realm is there is a demonic element. We have angels, literally hundreds of millions of angels that exist. They're spirits, but there's also demons.
This is a great point. I love the callback to the book of Acts. I think that's one of those stories that is often overlooked. Acts 7:55 through 56. But he, full of the Holy Spirit, gazed into heaven and saw the glory of God, and Jesus standing at the right hand of God. And he said, "Behold, I see the heavens opened, and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God." As Stephen was being stoned, he catches a glimpse of what heaven looks like, right? He sees what we would think of as the throne room, and that gives him peace in this moment of suffering. Now, as of late, there's been more of a focus on NDEs, near-death experiences. You've had professors at secular universities extensively research this and talk about it. I think we've also started to see more of an openness when it comes to miracles. Craig Keener wrote a 2-volume set just on miracles. I'm not here talking about just hearsay, but miracles that have been documented in some cases by medical professionals.
It's the verse that brought me to faith, John 1:12. But as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God, even to those who believe in his name. So the formula there is believe plus receive equals become. So we believe based on the data of, I believe anyway, based on the data of history that Jesus is who he claimed to be. He proved it by returning from the dead. So I believe that, but I had to take another step. I had to receive. And receiving is confessing that Jesus is who he claimed to be. He is God. He is Lord. Admitting my sin, receiving forgiveness from Jesus. When I do that, I become a Christian. Someone who is told someday by Jesus, "Be gone, I never knew you," would not have been a Christian.
One thing that really stood out to me from this interview is how often and how clearly Lee Strobel gives the gospel message. He's not wasting any time. He understood the assignment and he's delivering as expected. Earlier in the video, he talks about being visited by an angel as a young kid and how the angel told him essentially that he couldn't earn his way to heaven. He later encounters the same message from a pastor. This is the beauty of the Christian message. There is nothing you can do to earn your salvation. It's a free gift, a gift bought and paid for on your behalf. As much as this is the beauty of Christianity, this is also one of the things that people struggle with, right? It's one of the stumbling stones. They refuse to accept that nothing they do will ever be enough. The truth is that when we look at the evidence for Jesus, the things he said and did, the data really does support that he did, in fact, rise from the dead. And this is good news. But in order for it to be of any value, you must accept it. This reminds me of the passage in James 2:19. You believe that God is one. You do well. Even the demons believe and shudder. You see, the demons believe too, but they are unable or unwilling to receive Jesus for who he is.
The other phenomenon that's going on that I write about in my new book is that in the Middle East, in many Middle Eastern countries, it's illegal to share the Christian message. And so what is God doing? He's bringing dreams about Jesus to these people. This is a phenomenon that is sweeping the Middle East. People are not going to sleep as a Muslim, meeting Jesus in a dream, becoming Christians. That's not how it happens, because that could be just a subjective experience. No, there is corroboration to these dreams. So I'll give you an example. It's a woman named Noor, mother of 8, Muslim, lives in Cairo. One night she has a Jesus dream. It's the most profound, vivid dream, unlike any other she's ever had. And Jesus appears to her. And she feels the love and the grace and the forgiveness and the kindness of Jesus just radiating from him. And she's overwhelmed by it. She's never felt anything like it. And they're walking along a lake. And she says, Jesus, tell me more about you. And he says, my friend will tell you. And she says, who's your friend? And he gestures to another person she hadn't even noticed because she was so mesmerized by Jesus. A guy was walking with them along the lakeside. He said, my friend will tell you. She wakes up from the dream. The next day, she goes to the crowded marketplace in Cairo. She's walking in this crowded market. She sees the man from her dream. She goes up to him. You were in my dream. He said, whoa. He said, what are you talking about? Same face, same clothes, same glass. You were the man in my dreams. And he said, did you have a dream about Jesus? She said, yes. He was a missionary, undercover in Cairo. He wasn't going to go to the crowded marketplace on that Friday afternoon because it's chaotic, but he felt God had a mission for him, and he went that day. He met that woman, and he took her aside and opened the Bible and shared the message of Jesus to her. So that's external confirmation that it's not just something going on in her head, but this was a special dream that points to something outside that dream. See what I say? It mean in terms of corroboration. That's how these are happening. And I'm telling you, Shawn, these are so common in the Middle East today that sometimes you see an ad in the Cairo newspaper and it says, call this number and we'll tell you about the man in white that you met in your dream last night.
Are you serious?
Yep.
Wow, this is powerful. This has been happening for some time now in the Middle East. People are repeatedly having dreams about Jesus and turning to faith in Christ. I really appreciate his clarification here. This isn't just about people having dreams. It's what happens after that really puts, in a sense, the nail in the coffin. To be clear, I think their dreams are powerful enough on their own. I mean, when you have thousands of people essentially having the same dream, describing the same things, that seems to be an indication that something else is going on. This does bring to mind for me the passage in the book of Acts of the Ethiopian eunuch. This is Acts 8:29-31. And the Spirit said to Philip, go over and join his chariot. So Philip ran to him and heard him reading Isaiah the prophet and asked, do you understand what you are reading? And he said, how can I unless someone guides me? God gave this woman this dream, but he chose to work through other people to continue the transformation that he had started. It's important that we as Christians are ready and willing. The harvest is plenty, but the workers are few.
I think God intentionally left evidence that leads us, that can be used to lead us to the conclusion that Jesus is who he claimed to be. You know, when I was in law school, one of my heroes was a guy who was the greatest lawyer in the world. He was later, I think it was, he was in the Guinness Book of World Records as the most successful defense attorney who ever lived. His name was Sir Lionel Luckhoo. Get this, you'll appreciate this. He won 247 murder trials in a row as a defense attorney, either before the jury or on appeal.
Wow.
Yeah, nobody's ever done. He's in the Guinness Book of World Records, greatest lawyer ever lived. He was a skeptic like I was about the resurrection. He thought, Jesus didn't return from the dead and prove. He says, give me a break. And someone challenged him. Sir Lionel, you're the greatest lawyer. Have you ever taken your monumental legal skill and applied it to the historical record and come to an informed conclusion about whether or not Jesus did return from the dead? He said, no, I haven't, but I will. So he set out, he did what I did. He spent years investigating the evidence, and I'll recite to you one sentence he wrote that summarized his conclusion. He says, I say unequivocally that the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus Christ is so overwhelming that it compels acceptance by proof, which leaves absolutely no room for doubt. This is a guy that knows evidence. He could take what looks like an airtight case against his client and find all the flaws. He was knighted twice by Queen Elizabeth. He became a member of the Supreme Court of his country. And that was his conclusion about the evidence. By the way, I shared that story in California at a church where I just moved back in 2000. And a woman came up to me afterwards and she said, I'm your new neighbor. You just moved into my neighborhood. You haven't met everybody yet. I live down the block. I said, oh, it's great to meet you. She said, yeah, I'm Sir Lionel's sister.
Wow.
It's his sister.
Wow.
And I said, did I tell the story accurately? She said, absolutely. She said, in fact, let me show you some of his private papers where he did his research and so forth. And so she showed me some of his private writings and stuff.
It's wild to hear how this whole story comes full circle. I do agree with what he says here. Most people won't take the time to look at the evidence. And let's be honest, most people probably don't have the time to do this level of investigation. I think this is where it's important to have good resources to go to. The evidence for the resurrection is very strong. And if you want to dismiss it, you still have to account for the events that took place around that time and how those events left a lasting impact on our world. You still have to account something happened. What if you want to disagree with the resurrection event? Okay, what is a better alternative? What's a better explanation? There's been a lot thrown out there, a lot of ideas and different ways to kind of answer for this, but they all fall short. There's lots of holes in every single one that gets suggested or brought up. Remember, you have to account for an impact so powerful that we still feel it today and has shaped every aspect of our lives. No matter where you turn, you can't ignore the impact that Christianity has had across the world, right? It's not just the West, it's everywhere.
Let's move into Is God Real?
Yeah.
The book.
Yeah.
What is some of the evidence that really stood out to you?
Well,
Talk about DNA,
yeah.
the universe.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that really just stood out to you?
I think one of the most powerful discoveries of modern ages, and this only goes back, 50 to 100 years, people used to think that the universe was eternal. It always existed. But now we know from a series of scientific discoveries and philosophical arguments from the last century or so that the universe had a beginning in the past. At some point in the past, the universe began to exist. In fact, the great cosmologist Alexander Vilenkin, him and two other cosmologists, cosmology just means the study of the origin of the universe, came up with a theorem that says that even if our universe turns out to be one small part of a multiverse, the multiverse itself must have had a beginning. So what does that mean, that the universe had a beginning? Well, it harkens back to an argument for the existence of God that's been popularized by my friend, a philosopher, Dr. William Lane Craig. It goes like this. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. We now know that the universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe has a cause behind it. Well, what kind of a cause can bring a universe into existence? Well, it must be transcendent, which means apart from creation. It must be immaterial or spirit because it existed before the physical world. It must be timeless or eternal because it existed before physical time came into being. It must be powerful given the immensity of the creation event. It must be smart given the incredible precision of the creation event. Must be personal because they had to make the decision to create, must be caring because he so carefully crafted a habitat that we could exist in. And the scientific principle of Occam's razor tells us there would be just one creator. So that's a description of the God of the Bible, right there. Transcendent, immaterial or spirit, eternal, powerful, smart, personal, caring. It's a description of the God of the Bible.
Shawn points out some of the strongest evidence we have for a creator. And this is something that all worldviews have to account for. The view that the universe had a beginning is backed up by multiple disciplines. This is important because this strengthens the case. Lee mentions science and philosophy. I would also add math, right, as a discipline that points to a creator. Gavin Orland did a video recently kind of unpacking how math seems to point to a creator. Recommend checking it out. Out of all the qualities that he mentioned, the personal and caring are the two that I haven't given too much thought, but it makes a great deal of sense. And those two qualities alone rule out many of the other worldviews.
The 26-letter alphabet to spell out words. DNA uses this 4-letter chemical alphabet to spell out how to build you, how to build the proteins that make you. There are more words in one cell in your body than you would find in 200 years of the Sunday New York Times.
Wow.
Where does that come from? Nature cannot produce information. It can produce patterns. I live in Houston. If I go down to Galveston and the beach and the sand is wet from overnight and there's ripple marks in the sand, it would be logical for me to say the waves made those ripple marks in the sand because nature can make patterns. But if I'm walking down the beach and in the wet sand I see John loves Mary with a heart around it and an arrow through it, I wouldn't say, oh, the waves made that. Why? Because that's information. And without an exception, whenever we see information, whether it's a painting on a cave wall, whether it's a computer code, whether it's a novel, whenever we see information, there is always an intelligence behind it.
You often hear people say that give it enough time, things will arise, or give it enough time, we'll find an explanation. Well, here's the thing. We have allowed time to pass, and the evidence seems to continue to support that there is a creator. It's almost as if no matter where you turn, boom, there's the creator. Information points to a creator. And I don't think there's a reasonable way out of it. Thanks for tuning in. I'll catch you next time.